This is the Spurscast with your host, Paul Garcia.
Welcome back to another episode of the Spurscast. On today's episode, I will be joined by Project Spurs writer Collin Reid. In this episode, Collin and I will be discussing the Spurs' surprising start with a 3-2 record, a roster move that they made this past week, and also a trade rumor hovering around one of their veteran players. Collin, how are you doing? It's been a long time no see.
Yeah, it's been a while. I'm doing really well. It's the off season. It was good to kind of step back and recharge a bit. But you get into the first 2 weeks of the regular season, and the first game you're like, okay, I'm watching. I'm going to count everything. I'm going to say, oh, this is how many pick and roll possessions that blah 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 has. This is how well so and so defended the whatever. And then by game 5, you're like, okay, so much is happening. There's a game on every night. Yeah, everything is happening everywhere, and you just kind of get overwhelmed by it all.
I know a week and a half into the season, I'm really looking for one of those 2 days off, whenever that comes. I don't even know when that's coming. But yeah, man, it's glad to have you back on. All right, so like I said, man, this was a surprising start for the Spurs. Okay, so the Spurs do begin the season 3-2. Let's go through a quick recap of their first 5 games of the year. And I do want to note that Collin and I are recording this on a Thursday evening. So game 1 opens, and it looked like the Spurs were going to be the lottery team that everybody talked about. The tanking Spurs. They lose by 27 at home to the Charlotte Hornets. The Hornets were favored by 1.5 points. Then they go on the road and win in Indiana by 3 points. They had a comfortable lead at first. In the fourth quarter, Indiana made a strong comeback, and the Pacers were favored in that game. Then they go to Philly and defeat the 76ers by 9 points. That was an impressive win for San Antonio. Philly was favored by 13.5 points. Then they go to Minnesota, and they also defeat the Wolves on the first night on Monday this past week. The Wolves were favored by 8.5. And then their second loss of the season just came on Wednesday, where the Spurs lost to the Minnesota Timberwolves by 12. The Wolves built a 17-point lead on San Antonio, but San Antonio competed. They were right there within single digits of the Wolves in the fourth quarter. And we do want to note, though, that Devin Vassell and Josh Primo were injured for this game, so they were not in the game at all. And we don't know yet if they're going to play on Friday against Chicago. So, Collin, let's first get your thoughts. What were your thoughts on those first 5 games for the Spurs?
I think that before the game, Philly was probably the most surprising. The expectation was probably that the Spurs were going to get blown out. But I think now, with the benefit of hindsight and knowing that this Philly team is still trying to figure out exactly who it is and exactly what they're doing, it's not, to me, all that surprising that they lost to the Spurs team. I think they're 1-4 as we record this. And I think they're going to be an Eastern Conference powerhouse, but they're just maybe like the Celtics were at the start of last season, where they're trying to kind of change up a lot of their system, especially they had a whole training camp to bring in James Harden, all that kind of stuff. I think, if you were to look at these 5 games and the Spurs were to win any of them from the outset, that might be the most surprising. But I think now, the most surprising one to me is the fact that they only lost by 12 last night to the Wolves, because when they beat the Wolves by 9, I was absolutely sure the Wolves were going to come up back and blow the pants off of them. Just win by 30, 35. I thought they were going to be pissed off. I thought we were going to see Cat and Ant and just everyone humming. And then no Vassell, no Primo, so you think that even more. And then the Spurs hung around. So even though it was a loss and we are expecting the Spurs to lose, I thought that was going to be a 30-point game, running away with it, angry Timberwolves team. So that to me was kind of surprising, and I think the biggest takeaway for me is, the Spurs know who they are. They know that they're not competing for a championship right now.
Yeah.
And I think, and this might be, I know there's kind of a mysticism around Coach Pop because he's just been doing it for so long. But one thing I can say with certainty is, I think he's okay with putting a less talented group on the floor, but he is not okay with his team being out executed. And every night they're going to go in and they're going to execute. And so when you have a team like the Sixers who aren't cohesive yet, and the Spurs out execute them, the talent gap gets made up. When you have the Wolves who just are incorporating Gobert and Towns together, and there's a talent gap, the Spurs are going to out execute them. It does not matter how hard they are trying to rebuild or whatever. Pop will not abide by a lack of execution and a lack of effort. So I think that's why you're seeing these wins, and you might see some more early on in the season, but I think that's why they'll start to tail off, as teams kind of start to get that cohesion and they start to do that effort and execution advantage that the Spurs have will start to wear off. But I think that's kind of why they're catching teams by surprise early on in the season.
Yeah, and that kind of transitions us into one other point that I wanted to note is that, what you said there is that like the other teams aren't, have that camaraderie just yet like the Spurs do. The Spurs are off to a good start. And you could tell San Antonio was off to something strong by the preseason. I know that they got blown out that Rockets game, but then they played pretty well. They were kind of in every other preseason game, and so they have a lot of familiarity. But one thing let's talk about first is the offense. There's one key stat in here that I want to go through. So right now, through 5 games, the Spurs have the 11th ranked offense according to these are using the NBA stats. They are very fast. This is something they talked about in training camp in the preseason. They wanted to play fast, run teams off the floor, try their best that they could. So they're third right now in pace, and you saw that in that first win against the Wolves where Rudy Gobert and Karl-Anthony Towns, they really struggled to keep up with the Spurs, especially in fast break scoring. San Antonio outscored them 24-2. They are moving the ball really well. This is something where, they talked about this, the players that Coach Pop didn't put in a lot of set plays for this team in training camp in the preseason, because he more so just wants them to learn how to play basketball together. A lot of read and react kind of offense. Just, if you see a pick and roll, you see a mismatch, just execute, do their motion offense and just see where, there's back cuts, things like that. And they have good passing bigs like Zach Collins, Jakob Poeltl, who can do that. So you see that with this ball movement. I mean, they've already had 3 games with 30 assists. They lead the league right now with I think it's like 30.5 assists per game. They're number 1 on assist percentage. They're also doing well on the boards. They're top 10 there. And then here's the biggest reason why I think that they really, had a strong start as well is look at their 3 points, some of their 3-point numbers. They're top 10 right now in 3-point makes, a Spurs team in 3-point makes being top 10, and also their 3-point percentage. They're also top 10. They're shooting the ball well from 3. And, in the past few years, since they've had like DeRozan as a team leader, DeJounte Murray, it always showed on the stat sheet, whenever they won the 3-point line, it led to success for this team. But the majority of the time, they lost the 3-point line because they were a lot of mid-rangers and inside scoring. But right now, when your 2 go-to players, Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson, are averaging 8 3-point attempts a game, that's a total different shot philosophy for this team that lets them compete, and I think definitely keeps them in games, or like you said, kind of tightens that talent gap. Teams may have like the All-Stars and the All-NBA players, but if the Spurs are shooting threes like this, that's a huge difference. Out of these stats, here's my question. Which one do you think is going to kind of tail off, or which one do you think could end up improving? Or do you think like some of them are like kind of where they're going to end up being for the year?
So I think pace and offensive rebounds are kind of more about how they're playing. Mm-hmm. And just because this team is so young, I have a hard time imagining that 50 games into the season, they're going to be like, oh, we're tired of running. We can't do this anymore. I think if anything is, fool's gold right now, it's definitely – it might not be the 3-point attempts, but it might be the 3-point makes. I think in that Hornet game, they were taking a lot of threes in that game too. They just weren't making any of them. And I think, when I was watching that game coming into the season, I thought their 2 biggest weaknesses on offense were a lack of experienced creators and shooting. And that game just exposed that. There was turnovers every time someone tried to dribble the ball. No one could hit a shot. But then over the past 4 games, the shooting has been better. And I think the answer is probably somewhere in between. I do think if the 3-point shooting starts to go down, I think that the assists will go down just as a result of that. A good pass is made to an open guy, but he misses the shot. But I think their philosophy won't change. So I think their passing and stuff, they'll still be a good passing team. I think their assists will just go down because of the fact that their 3-pointers, I think, will be up and down all season. I think I look at Keldon and Devin Vassell as 2 players who I think might be up and down all season when it comes to that, just especially if for no other reason than, well, first of all, we haven't seen either of them come out with a 2 or 3 season stretch and just be these strong shooters, and we've seen time after time where players have one good shooting season and then they have a hard time replicating it. And we're talking about so-and-so player on the Jazz, 4 years ago had 40% shooting season and never got back to that, but he's still making money off of that one shooting season. So I think not only that, but also neither Keldon nor Devin have had to had so much of the offensive load on their shoulders. Yeah. So I think that they're going to be up and down all season when it comes to that. But in this isn't, I was looking up some stats when it came to play types before the podcast, and this isn't exactly related to 3-point shooting, but I wanted a quick quiz for you. Okay. So the number 1 point per possession leader when it comes to spot ups on the Spurs right now is Doug McDermott, which is not surprising. Okay. He makes 1.36 points per possession on spot ups. Can you guess who number 2 is?
Okay, spot ups. Is it? Oh no, it's Keldon.
It's Trey Jones. 1.3. Yeah, it's. I mean, he barely hit the cutoff for even like showing up on this because he's only had 10 spot up possessions. But it's just one of those funny things where you don't think of him as like a spot up, as a 3-point guy. And early on in the season, I think there's going to be some of these up and down stats. So the 3-point shot is one of them. I mean, if I'm wrong and that keeps up, then they are going to be a play-in team, which maybe isn't the best thing for them right now. But I think the other stuff, the pace, the offensive rebounding, all of that stuff, I think is pretty like manageable to keep that kind of stuff going. I just don't think the 3-pointers are as manageable for them.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I can't say if they're going to keep this up, but again, the way they're starting, if they do that though, they're going to be a successful team, and that's the thing you just got to watch. Let's go to the defensive end of the floor. This is an area where they are struggling, but a lot of it though, I would say is very skewed because it's such a small. We got to also remember this with all the stats. It's very small sample size, just 5 games, but a lot of this is went horrible for them because of that Wolves game where the Wolves shot 65% from the floor or 61%, whatever it was. So overall for defense right now, they're 24th on defense because of that Wolves game. They're dead last in opponent effective field goal percentage, which is kind of when you combine the inside with the 3-point and a field goal percentage. They're 26th in opponent rim makes, 10th in points off turnovers. That's a strength for them. And then 20th in opponent 3-point makes and 25th in opponent 3-point percentage. They had actually been guarding the 3-point line well for 2 or 3 games, but then that Wolves game really set them back because of just how well Minnesota shot, making 23s and making over 60% of them. What are your thoughts so far on their defense?
It's interesting because we talk about the 3-point percentage on offense being something that is has a lot of variance to it. But I think there have been a lot of people who've really dug into like defensive 3-point percentage and how that can be something that's really impacted by luck, especially when you only have a 4-game sample. Yeah. The second Wolves game, but also that first Hornets game, they were like flamethrowers. They could not miss from 3. Yes. So I do think the 3-point percentage, I think that might normalize a little bit. The rim makes is a little bit interesting just because, Pirtle there is someone who you can rely on as like a good rim protector. I think coming into the season, you would have expected the offense is going to be pretty ugly. Sometimes there's going to be flashes of fun and excitement just because it's a young and athletic team. But like for the most part, it's going to be a pretty bad offense, but then the defense is going to be competent enough, and that's going to be what keeps them in games. Especially kind of like, Trey Jones is not DeJounte in a lot of ways, but their kind of formula on defense the past couple of years has been DeJounte is the point of attack defender, and then Jakob kind of holds it up at the rim, and they can still do that system with Trey Jones in DeJounte's place. So you figured like, okay, their defensive system doesn't have to change too much. And like you said, only 5 games in. So this stuff is like 1 game changes this stuff massively. Yes. But I do feel like halfway through the season, I would be surprised if it's still the offense that's above average and the defense that's below average, because this team doesn't seem like all that much of an offensively talented team, but they actually have some underrated talent on defense. So I think we might see these things, maybe in 10 games or so kind of flip, where the offense now is what's lower and the defense is higher. And I think especially that opponent 3-point percentage might be a little bit just bad luck against them. Yeah,
I'll move with you. In the preseason, I mentioned how this is going to be when at the end of the year they're going to rank better defensively than they are offensively. So that's why it's surprising to see that they're 11th on offense right now. But yeah, I think that overall at the end of the day, it's going to be their defense. That's their strong point. And that's where they're going to improve as time goes on. All right, so now let's go to going forward. So when you look at the Spurs with this 3-2 record, and you look at their net rating, Cleaning the Glass has a formula where they basically project what would this team look like, and from past seasons teams of different teams. And so right now, the Cleaning the Glass, they project the Spurs at this point, on this Thursday to win about 29 games, 28.6 wins is their projection right now. And that is definitely past what Vegas wanted. Vegas only had the Spurs with 22 wins in this coming season. I mean, they've already gotten 3 out of the way, so they're just 19 away now from breaking that. And then, as far as again, they're 28.6 isn't going to get you in the playing game, but it's also, right now they're projected not to finish. They're projected to finish better than the Pistons, the Rockets, the Magic, the Pacers, the Thunder. And those are five, again, if you're six, you have the sixth worst record, that it's not getting you Victor Wembanyama or Scoot Henderson. So that could be a concern. So what do you think about just kind of their overall projections this early into the season? I know it's only 5 games.
Yeah. So, two things, and I think one of them, the Spurs aren't going to tank as hard as the process Sixers did. Yeah. But back in 2013, 2014, those Sixers started the year 3-0. And then they actually, after 6 games, they were 4-2. And later on this season, they had another 4-game winning streak. They still had a sub-20 win season, and they ended up getting Joel Embiid in the draft. So I think just because you might start hot doesn't mean that that's how the whole season is going to go. I don't think it's too likely that they surpass 30 wins still, but the difference I think between that Sixers season and this season is you look at those teams below the Spurs, and a lot of them have, I would say, a lot of downward gravity. A lot of them don't really have a lot of incentive to be better than the Spurs, and a lot of them aren't very talented. So even though the Spurs are only 3 wins ahead of the Orlando Magic, that might be a huge lead at this point. The Pistons, I do think, will probably even out as higher than the Spurs by the end of the season. But one thing that was interesting, it's funny that there ends up being 5 teams below the Spurs, because I just happened to look up what are your odds of getting the number 1 pick as the 6th worst record. And it is a important difference, but if you have the worst record, you have a 14% chance of getting the first pick. If you have the 6th worst record, you have a 9% chance. So that 5%, obviously that's the difference between a franchise altering move and not. But 14% is about flipping a coin 3 times and getting heads each time. And 5% difference does matter, but I think that there is this feeling that there's this chasm, but they've smoothed up the lottery odds so much that even with the 6th worst odds, it's about a 1 in 10 chance. Still not great, but even if the Spurs had the worst record, they would have less than a 30% chance at getting the 1st or 2nd pick. So it's they've smoothed out the odds where even if the Spurs had the worst record, they'd be just about as likely to have the 5th pick as one of the top 4. So it just is one of those things where I feel like people can't get too high or too low on, they won this many games, they're this ahead. Because at the end of the day, the ping pong balls are going to be what determines it. And, with the 6th worst record, they still have a 9% chance. If they have the worst record, honestly, not much better than that. So I think they'll come back to earth a little bit, but there are a couple of teams behind them that I don't see passing them already, which is crazy to say. I thought the Magic would be better than this, and they're an exciting team. But I almost feel like I said, a 3-game lead that the Spurs have is going to be insurmountable at this point, which is kind of insane to say, but it's just, I think that their chance at the worst record might be over, but I think that they still have a good chance at a very good pick this year.
Yeah, and then just the fact that we've seen already, this team competes, and if the opponent's not ready for them to, there's a chance they could come out, in your building, and they can end up with a win against you. So it's something to watch. Again, it's only 5 games. We'll continue to see how this team does. All right, now let's talk about the rotation, Collin, for the Spurs this early in the season. So Coach Pop has basically been playing everyone except the rookies, aside from Jeremy Sohan, the players like Malachi Branham, Blake Wesley, they recently got sent to Austin, Dominic Barlow. So those players aren't playing, but other than that, he's got a strong 9-man rotation that he's using, and then also he has he'll put in Keita Bates-Chop at certain moments, or Isaiah Roby, Gorgie Jang. But let's just first talk about the 9 players, the key rotation players. So let's talk about the starters. Devin Vassell, and these numbers are rounded from their box score stats. Devin Vassell right now is averaging 20 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. Just some notes on him. His 3-level scoring is very evident. Like we've talked about, he's averaging 8 threes a game. He's accurate from the 3-point line right now. He's getting to the free throw line on his drives. He's creating for others, and he's rebounding well. Keldon Johnson's averaging 22, 6, and 3. He's also averaging 8 threes a game, like I mentioned. He's also being accurate from 3. He's finishing close to the rim a lot better this season to start the season. He's a leader in drives and he mostly attacks when he does drive. He doesn't really pass the ball out. He's also boarding well, rebounding well. Jakob Poeltl is giving you 15 points, 11 rebounds, and 4 assists. A strong quarterback for this team, and then also bringing down those 11 rebounds. Trey Jones is starting point guard on offense, 14 points, 4 assists, 4 rebounds. He is averaging 2.4 3-point attempts, so he's definitely using that shot a little bit more this year. He's attacking on his drives, and what really sticks out with him is his deflection, steals, and also contesting shots. So you mentioned there, Collin, that with DeJounte gone, there's still more point of attack for Trey to do more on defense. And then Jeremy Sohan, the rookie, is averaging 7 points, 4 rebounds, and 1 assist. And we do want to note that he had 2 straight scoring games of 10 or more points recently against the Wolves. Some things about him is that he's finishing very well near the rim. He's like 10 of 15 in the restricted area. He's driving and moving the ball for the team. He's contesting shots on defense, and also he's boarding well. You don't talk about each player on the starting lineup. Just anything you want to say about any of the starters right now, how they're playing.
I think, one of the things that I have appreciated has been how well Trey Jones has stepped into that kind of starting primary offensive creator role. There was a couple games he just reads the floor real well. I don't remember which game it was, but I think Vassell got trapped kind of like near the half court line, and he just spotted it early and like flashed to the one spot in the floor where there was like an outlet for Vassell to make so that he could continue to play, and like it's just this level of court awareness and this level of like where people are situated. I was talking about this with several people, but I think there is him and Pirtle, especially, there's a type of player who is maybe not exciting because you think, oh man, look at Keldon, how dynamic he is. If he only gets 10% better, he could be like a superstar. Or imagine Vassell just 10% better than what it. And you know what Trey Jones is going to be his whole career, and he's going to be good at that, and it's going to be a good long career. And it reminded me of Kyle Anderson too. Like exactly who they are. They'll never be stars, but they have a role, and they're very good at that role. And like that's something that's very important to a championship team. That might be why Pirtle gets moved for a pretty good haul between now and the end of the season if he does get moved, because he has like 3 or 4 things he just excels at. I think the other thing that I found a lot of fun has just been how hard Sohan will run in the open court. Just like, and he got 3 alley-oops off of that in the first Timberwolves game alone, where they get the ball, the Spurs rebound the ball, and he's just running, and that's fun to watch just because they haven't had a lot of that on their team. From a player, DeJounte would sprint down the court, and a lot of their ball handlers would sprint. But in terms of like a big man just running the floor and getting to the basket, the Spurs haven't had that for as long as I can remember, and it's a whole lot of fun to watch. And I think, he's not going to be perfect when it comes to scoring in the half court this season or maybe even next season. But if he can run in transition, he's going to actually be able to maintain that, 7 to 10 points per game, just because he's going to be able to find open shots with how hard he runs in the open court.
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed about Jones that was very interesting to me was like he's really aggressive when he drives. He doesn't do it all the time, but when he does, he's going to the rim. Normally you would think he's this very patient quarterback, but when he does do his drives, like he's going straight there and like he's trying to finish, and he has been finishing for them. And then there was something else I wanted to say about Sohan. I can't remember what it was, but his 3-point shot. So one good thing is, yes, I know he struggles in his shot. We all knew that coming in, but the good thing is like he's not taking bad 3-point shots in terms of like if he's wide open, yes, he's taking it if it's late in the shot clock. It's not like he's putting up these early 3-point shots with like 7 seconds to just off the clock. So again, that's going to be a shot that develops for him, but at least he's taking it in the right context of the game. He's not forcing it. All right, so let's go to the bench. The main 4 players who come off the bench for San Antonio. You got Josh Richardson, averaging 12 points, two rebounds, 3 assists. He's also averaging 5 3-point attempts. He's accurate from 3 right now. He stands out with deflections and steals on the defensive end. Josh Primo is averaging 7 points, 3 rebounds, and 5 assists. He's creating for his teammates very well. He is struggling though with his shot overall, just inside and outside. Primo's struggling to finish his shots. Zach Collins off the bench with 7 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. He's contesting shots very well and blocking shots as well. He really sticks out compared to his teammates. And then Doug McDermott, an instant spark on with offense off the bench, 10 points per game right now, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 4.4 threes, and he's also accurate from the 3-point line. What do you think about their players, any other players off the bench that you want to mention?
I think last season they had started McDermott, and I don't think he was quite right for that role. But I think he is like the perfect come off the bench, give a spark role. I think he's been really great this season. Like his 3-point shot has been falling. Like he provides a lot of energy, great cutter, going to move well off the ball. That kind of thing is really important to that kind of, it's interesting because we talked about, you mentioned the motion offense, and I had a piece breaking down a play where I said, hey, like this kind of looks like the motion offense. And, this team, way worse, way less talented, but in some way reminds me of some of those early 2010 Spurs teams where you have like a first unit that's very deliberate. They're going to work for their shot in the open court or in the half court. They're gonna like move. Okay, then shoot. And then they have this backup unit that's like a spark plug with tons of shooting on it. They're just gonna come out and shoot. And then they're gonna build a 30-point lead on your bench. And then the first team's gonna come back again and just like slowly paper cut you to death in the half court. Again, way less talented, but it's kind of interesting to see this return to like the early 2010 Spurs, because I know that a lot of Spurs fans and a lot of people who cover the team look at that style of play very fondly. And I was not expecting that that's where Pop would take the playbook back. It makes a lot of sense, though, when you think they don't have like that one guy that you give the ball to and go out and score for you. But it has been fun just to see that style of play that was so entertaining. And I think Primo, you talked about him. I think he'll kind of even out too. I know early on I wrote about why I thought Trey Jones should be the starting point guard and how he's the only one that had like self-creation and creating for other chops on this team. Primo early on in the season has an unassisted field goal, like over half of his field goal made or unassisted. So he is completely flipped that. That was not the case for him last year. A lot of his field goals were created by someone else, a lot of spot up shots and all that kind of stuff. But this year he has been given the ball a lot and he's been dribbling a lot. And it seems like Pop is really trying he'll play Trey Jones and Josh Primo together sometimes, but he's staggering them a lot because those are really the only two guys who can like dribble the ball down the court every single possession. Like Keldon, of course, and Devin, of course, they can do it, but like every possession, like run a pick and roll every possession. Those are like the two guys on the roster who can do that. So I think Pop's really trying to keep them separated and have one of them out there at all times. So completely new role for Primo. I know in the summer league we saw that they were trying to incorporate that into his game. Yeah. And I'm going to be honest, I was a little bit skeptical of his ability to be like, I thought maybe the best role for him would be like Derek White 2.0, plays hard on defense, a really good connector on offense, a really good secondary playmaker, and is going to like make the right play every time. I kind of doubted his ability to be like that number one offense driver, but so far early in the season, he's been good at that, even if his shot hasn't been falling. But I think that'll come back as he gets used to his new role.
Yeah, no, I agree there. Especially, I've been very impressed, like I said, with just the way he's moving the ball. And again, his shot's not falling, but like you said, Colin, he probably has like the most like I don't know how to say like it's like it seems easy for him to like kind of break down a defender, like just get into wherever he wants to his spots compared to most of his teammates. So the bench has been very good, like you mentioned there, and then also their versatility with they be able to bring in either Keita Bates-Diop or Isaiah Roby. Those are also two very different players in how they play and what they do on the court, but they're impactful in their minutes whenever Pop does bring them in. So again, that's also another reason why this team has been off to a good start, is because their bench is very effective early on when they get into games. So now let's go through some team news from this past week and also a trade rumor for the Spurs. So first team news, the Spurs did waive Jordan Hall, who was on a two-way contract on Monday. And then the reason why they waived him was to sign Charles Bassey to a two-way contract. They signed Bassey. He's a 6'9" big who has 23 games of NBA experience with the Philadelphia 76ers. And then also this past week, Shams Charania of The Athletic had a trade rumor about how he says the Lakers have held preliminary discussions with the Spurs in recent weeks showing interest in Josh Richardson. Again, Shams only noted Richardson. He did say that the Lakers are keeping communication with the Spurs and several other teams, regarding trades. And so I don't think the Lakers would do this, but I think right now if there was a package the Spurs might be interested, they definitely want. I think right now because it's early in the season and Richardson's playing very well, maybe they do want a first round pick for him. So they'll just using the trade mechanics, I found a deal for like Richardson, Langford for Russ, and one first. I don't think the Lakers would do that with those two picks. I think they would still want a better trade, a group or package for Russ and those two firsts. What do you think about that trade, or just this rumor?
Yeah, I think, like you were saying, I think that some people are so fixated on the fact that the Lakers only have 2 first-round picks that I think the instant reaction is like, oh, they only have to give up 1 pick. They'll have a whole nother pick to get talent with. And it's like, well, this would be an amazing trade for the Spurs. Richardson is not someone who projects to be on the team like in 5 years from now. And that pick could be really, really valuable. LeBron probably won't be there anymore when that pick conveys. So it's just a matter of if it sounds way too good for one team, it's probably not good enough. Like, yes, the Lakers have a Russ problem. They lost without Westbrook last night. Yeah. And if Josh Richardson makes you go from 0-4 to something. I mean, like I just, if that's the fix for your great collapse, then I mean, what's your upside? Is it the play-in? Like I think the Miles Turner Buddy Hield thing sounds better for them, just because it's kind of shooting, and then Miles Turner is an amazing defender. He can play next to Anthony, all that kind of stuff. That's not the Spurs, but yeah, I think if something sounds too good for one team, it's probably not how it's going to go down.
Yeah, no, and just I don't even know what the Lakers do at this point. I mean, why if you're going to get rid of your future by trading those 2 picks, why are you going to do that if you're not going to be, better than a play-in team at this point? I don't know what they're going to do, but it's just interesting again that they're already interested in Richardson. I'm sure they're going to be interested in McDermott. I'm sure they're going to be interested in Jakob Poeltl. Just and those Spurs veterans, other teams are going to want those players because they know that 2 of those players, Poeltl and Richardson, are on expiring contracts, and then McDermott has 1 year left on his deal, and we know that those players, even though they're part of the rotation, they don't quite fit the timeline for this young Spurs team. So again, we'll kind of see what happens up until that February trade deadline. All right, so before we close out this episode, Collin, you wrote this past week. You had a piece where it was called "The San Antonio Spurs Tanking, Not This Year." Well, can you give the listeners just a little bit brief description of that piece that you wrote?
Yeah, I think for me it's important to kind of use the right words when we're having a conversation about something, and I think we've become a little bit too fast and free with the word tanking. Yeah. I had a conversation with someone on Twitter, and I can't remember exactly who it was, but I was like, there has to be a way to differentiate between what the Magic have done over the past couple seasons and what the process 76ers or what the Thunder of the past couple seasons did. Even the Magic, they traded 3 of their best players away, but it wasn't like, we're going to send a healthy Al Horford home because he's going to win us games, and then the next year he's like contributing to a finals run. Like there are teams that do that, and then there are teams that stay young, and I think there has to be a way to differentiate between that. Part of the reason why I wanted to make that differentiation is because you can already see there's this fervor building about this season is about Victor Wembanyama or bust, and to me, that's so incredibly boring. Even if the Spurs get the worst record, there's only a 14% chance. Mm-hmm. The lottery isn't until the end of June. So you're telling me like, okay, this whole season, really just throw it away, stop paying attention, wake up at the end of June, and if they get the number 1 pick, this season is a success. And like, as someone who just really enjoys basketball and loves analyzing the game, that's just so boring to me. And I feel like we need a better way to like look at this season and to analyze this season and to be able to like dig into what's going on with the Spurs now without being so future focused that the only thing we care about is a 7'4" guy in France who looks like he's going to be amazing, but hasn't played a second of NBA basketball. So I just think I think there is I made the point in the piece that all tanking is a form of rebuilding, but not all forms of rebuilding are tanking. And I think the Spurs are clearly rebuilding. And they might get to tanking by the end of the year where they're resting healthy players or something like that if they can't find trades for them. But right now, they're not. They're just putting out the lineup they have, and they're going to – whatever record comes to them, they're going to get that, and they're going to develop the players the best they can. Yeah,
that's the key word there is development. I think that's what Coach Pop says. And it said in training camp preseason, like this is like just about growing these individual players, and all he wants them all to improve as the year goes on. Now that may not be a result in a playoff team or even the worst record in the league, but again that's what the key is for this team. So again, we'll kind of see what happens. And again, that's a good piece there by Collin. So make sure you check that out over on ProjectSpurs.com. So thanks to Collin for joining me on this episode of the Spurscast. I also wanted to say thank you to Joe Garcia for mixing and producing this episode. From all of us at Project Spurs, stay safe and have a great day.